Lawyers, who is the most messed up person you have had to defend in court? Story 1. Here's one for all you animal lovers. This happened about 8 years ago. My client, a run-of-the-mill mid-50s gentleman, nothing out of the ordinary and no priors, apparently hated his neighbor's cats. He lived in a garage apartment with a wooden deck and porch that overlooked a shared yard with his neighbors. Apparently, the neighbors were cat hoarders who took in all of the feral cats in the area, and they didn't even bother to get them spayed and neutered. So there was a constant stream of new kitties of all shapes, colors, and sizes patrolling and marking the area. While unfortunately for my client, one of the favorite places for the little felines to mark was his front door. So one day he's tending the plants on his deck when he sees a smaller cat, not full grown but not a kitten, approaching his garage to presumably do its business under his deck, where the local cats had set up their own personal litter box. In the moment, he decided that he will try to scare the feces out of the little kitty and drop one of his terracotta planters off of his porch as it comes closer. Let's just say he didn't miss the cat, and the neighbor's mentally handicapped adult son just so happened to see the cat's demise. Animal cruelty charges ensue. I get him a pre-trial diversion agreement wherein the charges are dropped if he doesn't get into any more trouble for 12 months. We waited the 12 months and had the charges dismissed and expunged from his record. Ooh, interesting start to the video. I don't think this guy hated his neighbor's cats, just hated that they decided to make his door their litter box. Did this guy try talking to the neighbors about this? Personally, I love cats and would have loved to have a constant stream of, a constant parade of new feline friends to befriend. I'd probably start investing in kitty litter myself to help things out. Story 2. Not a criminal defense lawyer, but I did defend a guy in a tax sale proceeding, where you don't pay your property taxes and the government puts a lien on your house and sells it out from under you. The slimeball had managed to avoid paying any property taxes for like 10 years, and avoiding a sale by shuffling the property between himself and various ex-wives and girlfriends. He didn't even have a somewhat sympathetic reason to not pay his taxes, i.e. lost a job, health problems, unexpected expenses. He was just an alcoholic D-bag who didn't feel like he should have to pay taxes. Anyway, the courts finally caught up with him, served him properly, and scheduled his house for an upset sale. He wanted us to go in there and put him on the stand, which I told him wouldn't help. In this type of case, the only way you can stay the sale is to pay the taxes owed, or show that there was a flaw in service. But he insisted, and he was the client/paying, so whatever. Next day, he shows up to the hearing, 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, completely freaking reeking of vodka. I did not put him on the stand. He lost his house. Surprise, surprise, he didn't pay anything on top of the small retainer he gave us. On a related note, this is why I hate working in small-town real estate law, and why I'm thankful I'm switching to a different field and firm in a few weeks. Out of the dozens of foreclosure tax sales cases I've represented in 1.5 years, maybe like 2 have been clients who have actually just hit hard times and weren't complete pieces of feces. That's awful. Only 2? There's that many people that are just trying to get out of paying taxes because they don't wanna? I wonder what area this guy is switching to. Story 3. My dad does criminal defense appeals, and his favorite client was a guy who got arrested for stealing a car. The client had broken into a house just looking to steal whatever he could find. He was wandering around grabbing stuff when he found the keys to a really nice car. I forgot what kind of car, but it was probably a Ferrari or something. So the client drops everything, goes out to the garage, and takes off. For the next few weeks, the client takes the car out in the middle of the night and goes looking for cops. Once he found them, he would honk the horn, flash his lights, and get their attention, then take off in a high-speed chase. He did this for a few weeks, and the cops were getting really ticked, but eventually they got the helicopter on him and he wrapped the car around a telephone pole. But here's where the story gets really good. One day, my dad gets a call from his client, who is in prison, and the client just chats with him about the news, weather, and all kinds of stuff unrelated to his case. The next day, he calls back again, same unrelated stuff. Third day, my dad gets another call, and after chatting for a while, the client says, "I bet you're wondering why I keep calling you." My dad admits that he was kind of curious. "Well, last week there was a race riot here, so all the Mexicans, blacks, and whites are on lockdown. But I'm Native American, and I get along with everybody. So there's no line on the phone, but I don't have anyone to call." Not one care in the world for this guy. He seems to be at peace no matter what his situation is. He seems to see the positive side of anything. Chaotic. Not evil, though. Not good. Chaotic neutral. Story 4. I'm fortunate to have not had any really bad morally cases. I've had lots of people who suffered from fairly severe mental illness, but you can't feel anything but bad for them. They've got it pretty hard as is, before you factor in the law. And then you've got your run-of-the-mill feces heads. People that know better, have the capacity to be good people, and could probably live an easier, less stressful life if they'd just quit breaking the law. Pharmaceutical dealers are a good example of that. Every 2-bit pharmaceutical slinger thinks he's Tony Montana or Walter White. He is not. He is a 2-bit pharmaceutical slinger who can barely sell enough pharmaceuticals to avoid his junky Motel 6 room for the weekend, before getting busted for the 6th time in a decade because he has not learned yet that when the pretty girl comes up to him in the parking lot and says she wants pharmaceuticals, it is a sting. It is always a sting. I've had plenty of unalivers, wife beaters, child assaulters, etc. as clients. All of them were messed up or bad in the sense that they suffered moral failings and broke the law. But I wouldn't say any of my clients were like depraved or anything. When I was a prosecutor, however, I did get to try a guy who beheaded someone. That dude was pretty awful. On the private side, I am very, very selective. I refuse to take cases for people that are feces heads. And if I find out you're a feces head mid-hearing, I'm done. I had one guy get very angry during a family court negotiation and act violent, threatening with opposing counsel, cursing, slamming fists on the table, etc. I marched outside, told the judge I would like to withdrew from the case, and sent him his retainer back in the mail. Life is too short to waste good time on people that cannot behave like grown-ups in court. Story 5. Not a lawyer yet, but just this summer in Maryland, a guy decided to take his sure thing acquittal and toss it out the window. In this area of Maryland, stealing cars from gas stations is popular, and this exactly is what our criminal did. He stole some woman's car while she was pumping gas. Shortly thereafter, when police are talking to the woman at the same gas station, the thief drives right by in the stolen car as she's describing it, so she just points at it and says, "That's actually it right there." The 2 officers on scene decide to chase him. The problem is, their department's policies only allow chases in very limited circumstances. Generally, armed crimes are the only way to get to chase a suspect. Car theft is not one of the excuses to initiate a chase, so the officers are breaking their own self-imposed rules. Our thief leads this cruiser on a chase down the highway, zipping between cars, until the cruiser swerves to avoid another car, flips, throws the driver from the vehicle, and unalives him. The thief is eventually caught, but with evidence showing that the officers engaged in a chase they weren't allowed to begin, the guy was set to get off, because all he had done was steal a car and commit some reckless driving offenses that were only going to get him like 6 months, which he had basically served by the date of the trial. But rather than get away with it, our thief decided to write a letter to his friend from jail, asking him to unalive a witness he thought might help convict him. I sat in the courtroom just face-palming as the prosecutor read from the letter. The thief went from time served to 15 years with a single sheet of paper. Story 6. Not the most outrageous story, as I'm no longer practicing in the traditional sense and never did criminal work, but as a first-year associate, I was instructed by a partner in another department to defend one of his friends who was being sued for defaulting on a couple of loan agreements. My client told me, "Just drag this out as long as you can. I intend to pay the guy back, but I need time to raise the cash." We had a first appearance coming up before a judge, a kind of case management pretrial procedure. On the day of, my client emailed me and told me he wouldn't be attending because he had some important investment meeting to attend. Yeah, right. I went to court. The plaintiff proceeded to tell me this long, drawn-out story about how he was trying to get his money back from my client while also tending to his dying, now dead wife. He also produced a ton of extremely nasty emails sent by my client in response to the plaintiff's heartfelt pleas for the return of his money, which were all new to me. In one of the emails, which the judge read aloud, the plaintiff wrote something like, "Please, I need my money back. My wife is dying, and I can't work right now." My client's response, "You want your money back? Sue me. Otherwise, I'll see you in hell." I basically spent the next hour getting yelled at by the judge. I can't believe it. I actually feel sorry for a lawyer. He didn't deserve that judge hate. I wonder if that partner knew this kind of reaction was going to happen and he palmed it off on this poor sap. Story 7. I have tons of these, but the best is a woman who was charged with stuffing a stroller with items she intended to steal at a toy store. Larceny of some degree. As a side note, she was about 5 foot 4 inches tall and about 3 bills. Also a rather impressive neckbeard she played with. She had a history of this exact crime as well as a rather extensive felony history, so she was looking at extensive jail/prison time. She was in custody, and when I went to meet with her, she demanded I bring the prosecutor into the jail to cut a deal. I explained that this prosecutor would not be interested in any deal unless she could offer something really big in an effort to manage her expectations about getting relief this way. That was a mistake. She stood up and threw her chair at me and started screaming that she was an unaliver, yo! And I know tons of unalivers, mother friender. The part that made the whiteboard at the office was when she said while she was in jail, I ain't going to jail. I know unalivers. Ain't going to jail, period. .com. From that point forward, everyone in the office used period.com to emphasize everything. Story 8. I was a document clerk at a law firm when this happened. A woman alleged that a coworker violated her at the fast food establishment they both worked. As a document clerk, I did a lot of the initial fact-finding in documents/photos/photographs and would write up a short memo to the head attorney of the case. It would make it easier for him to see the important stuff and not waste his time or the client's money. In this case, there was a video that was sent in by the employer. It wasn't labeled, but I still popped it in the CD drive. I opened it up on my work computer and watched the grainy spicy time of the plaintiff and the alleged violator. It looked completely consensual. If anything, she initiated it. The weirdest part? At one point during the spicy act, he has her bent over next to the fryer station. She reaches into the basket, grabs a fry, and eats it while he's thrusting into her. I immediately sent the DVD to the head partner to take a look. 10 minutes later, I'm sitting in my office and hear, "Ha! She ate the fry!" Story 9. Back in the 80s, my father defended a man who broke into his ex-girlfriend's trailer, violating a restraining order. He wanted to write her a note, but couldn't find anything to write with, so he stabbed her dog in the eye and used the blood to write it. As far as I know, the dog survived, and the man was found not guilty because of insanity. There was also this one case where his client was charged with having child porn, and he had to verify the evidence. After signing about 1 million forms and getting permission from a judge, he was escorted by a police officer into a small room where he viewed the video. Yep, it was child porn. It wasn't some Girls Gone Wild video where a 17-year-old lied about her age. It was straight-up sodomization of infants. They were crying and everything. He told me that was the worst thing he's ever seen in his career. Yuck. Just yuck to this story all around. That's all the ugly I care to tolerate in one post. Let's move on, shall we? Story 10. I am a trial paralegal, but my old firm represented a property management company that was particularly slimy. A few tenants were suing the property manager because they had gotten sick from the living conditions in the property units. However, there was no record of the tenants ever reporting issues with the property units, so theoretically, there was a bit of a defense for the manager. He could not fix what he did not know about. This case had been going on for a year, and we discover that the manager has been hiding evidence from us. There were nearly 100 complaints from tenants. There was also even more tenants that had gotten seriously sick from the living conditions. My firm urged the manager to settle, and then he was fired after the case was over. Story 11. I had a client that went on an hour-long rambling statement about conspiracies and the injustices of the system, only barely touching on the actual DUI charge we were defending. The prosecutor didn't object to any of it. He just let the feces roll. And I didn't cut him off because I had this conversation with him 20 times before in private. He wanted to state his piece against all of my warnings, so I just let him. The judge was pretty ticked and eventually cut him off. When he came back to the table, he just kept smelling this small pillow his son gave him for good luck. When the jury went back to deliberate, he asked me, "How do you think we did?" Guilty in about 4 minutes. I saw him at the jail a month later to turn himself in for an overnight, and he was telling the other inmates how much I screwed up his case. Story 12. Appointed to represent indigent defenders in a DSS abuse/neglect case. This one involved pharmaceutical abuse. Show to court, and the caseworker is showing me her latest hair test results are off the charts. Client story: not using powdered pharmaceuticals. Just dating a powdered pharmaceutical dealer. Keeps it on a ledge over the bed. Must have been bumping uglies real hard and some sprinkled in her hair. I ignored the scientific argument that that's not even how a hair test works. Wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. Which sounds better, I tell her. I messed up and did some powdered pharmaceuticals this weekend, or my boyfriend dealt with the stuff and railed me so hard he made it snow in my hair. Do people think they can just fast talk anybody? That is so ridiculous. Has this person ever gotten away with such a bold lie in the past? How in the world was he thinking this would fly? Story 13. As long as y'all enjoy dark humor, I've got a story from the judge's point of view. The defendant was a gang member with a long rap sheet. My friend's dad was presiding. They took a recess, and the judge and both attorneys were chatting on the steps of the courthouse while the defendant was smoking down by the curb. Car drove up, and two guys with bandanas covering their faces jumped out, shot and unalived the defendant, and drove off. My friend's dad turned to the two attorneys and said, "Well, guess that's settled. Who wants to grab lunch?" Story 14. Once had a guy who was charged with his third strike for child violation. His attitude was, "I may as well go away for life because I can't stop doing this, so it's better for everyone that I be in prison." How can a defense lawyer just let someone plead and take life without parole? I mean, he may have been right objectively, but that's not my role in the system. I finally got him something like 15 to life. He'll probably never get out, but at least there's a possibility. He was one sick puppy, but at least he realized it. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.